So you've come a long way since those days when you used to sit like some kind of musical monk sequestered in the wilderness of your own bedroom. You played, recorded, layered and built musical worlds in solitude. Your congregation in those days was quite literally just you, a motley ensemble of your own digital clones staring back at you from the screen. But how things have changed. Now the world is in the room with you. Thousands of people crammed into a venue, eyes locked on you, collectively waiting to be told what noises to make. You give the first gesture and suddenly they're not just an audience, they're a choir. They're your choir, they're your instrument. But this isn't like church where a congregation sings a familiar tune. Here they don't know what's coming next. You are both conductor and composer, guiding them through uncharted harmonic terrain, shaping their voices with the wave of a hand, like some kind of human theremin. But how do you learn to play an instrument made of people? Like any instrument, it takes time, exploration, experimentation. But unlike a piano or a guitar, you don't get to practice this one in private. You have to test it out live in front of those very same thousands of people. It's a challenge because the instrument is the audience is the instrument. But hey, you love a challenge, and apparently so does your audience. And it seems like your whole life has been leading you to this point. As a child, you watched your own mother conducting orchestras, commanding the massed ranks with the wave of a hand. As a young lad, you learned the skills of improvising, creating music in your head and bringing it to life in real time. And now, as a grown man, you've come to understand music as a truly spiritual power, the power of harmony, the power of choral music, and the power of bringing people together to sing as one. This won't just be a little light entertainment between songs. This will be the spiritual highlight of your show. You're Jacob Collier, and you've created the audience choir. The question is, just how far can you push this thing?
Over the last few years, I've just become increasingly obsessed and fascinated by the idea that you can conduct an audience in harmony. I'll fashion the audience into a few different parts, and then I point to a group and I'll lift them up or push them down. And my job is to give them a pathway where there's only one note that over 50% of the audience would think to do, so that there's this mass gravitational pull and I don't have to explain what's going on. So I'm navigating chords like this sort of diatonically. Everyone always knows more than they think they know about music. Anyone who's ever heard music has a inner structure and a sort of skeletal understanding of how harmony works, whether or not they think of themselves as that. And when it comes to music, most people just need permission. They don't actually need skill. They need permission to start being involved.
Even though it was 10 years before you were born, you've seen those epic crowd sing-alongs, Freddie Mercury at Live Aid, a sea of voices echoing his every note. These moments are a staple of the stadium rock experience. You recognise the tricks, the old, time-tested techniques. Call and response, one of the oldest in the book. The singer calls, the crowd echoes. Sing something harder, the crowd fails, everyone laughs. It might seem simple, but the payoff is huge. For a few moments, the crowd becomes a single entity, everyone riding the same wave, working towards the same goal. It's a moment of communal flow state, where individual voices dissolve into something greater. And yet, for all its power, this was still just a game, a bit of inconsequential fun. It took a bold and brilliant mind to see that the true potential of this art form was still untapped. Fast forward to around the year of your birth, Bobby McFerrin steps onto the stage. He starts with something familiar, the call and response, the collapse into laughter.
Try it.
But McFerrin takes the audience much more seriously than your average rock star. He knows they're capable of more. With only a little help, they push beyond the laughter and eventually sing the pretty complicated winding melody in a 3-part canon.
Over here now.
Now, instead of the humour of "we're all so rubbish," the audience is left with "I can't believe we just did that." McFerrin's discovery, the one you would later make yourself, is that audiences know far more about music than they realise. Set the context right, give them 2 notes, no instruction, no theory, and as if by magic, they will all land on the same 3rd note.
Okay.
The laughter here is the sound of an audience surprising itself. McFerrin thought in melody, but your mind is wired for harmony. So when you set out to turn an audience into an instrument, it was never going to be just a unison chant. It had to be something richer, something polyphonic. It starts with a simple triad. Split the audience into 3 groups, 3 notes. The audience holds the bottom 2, and you begin to move the top voice. And just like with McFerrin's audience, they know where to go without instruction, without theory. But now there's harmony, and you notice how straight away there's electricity in the air. This doesn't just feel like a party trick, it feels much more intense, much more emotional. Each new note subtly shifts the temperature in the room. You've unlocked level 1, simple diatonic movement over held notes. It's a nice beginning, but you're just getting started. You introduce a suspension, a note that clashes just enough to create a sense of tension. And then you resolve the clash in the middle voice. The pathway is clear and there's only 1 note for them to choose. And then you bring them home. The cadence lands and it feels like music has been conjured out of nowhere. But it's not just any music, not just any cadence. It's what's called a standard cadential 6/4, the kind of resolution that has structured Western harmony for centuries, a move straight out of a Bach chorale. And that's perhaps not surprising because singing Bach chorales with your mum and sisters as a kid was your idea of fun. And yet an untrained audience, guided only by the movement of your hands, has just recreated it out of thin air. That sense of harmonic arrival, of going somewhere, is what makes this so much more than a party trick. It really is genuine music making, and it gives everyone a sense of purpose. Sometimes all it takes is a simple sequence, and you can almost feel the audience sensing in advance where they're going to end up. Let's call this one the staggered climb. You can also lead them somewhere a little unexpected, like here accompanying Chris Martin from Coldplay, where the phrase ends by substituting the relative minor C-sharp minor instead of the expected E major.
And I will try to fix you.
All of this has taken you a couple of years to figure out. You've worked out simple movements, sequences, and points of arrival. The gestures in your earliest attempts sometimes caused a bit of confusion. But now you're a master of the instrument. You've borrowed conducting gestures like the finger wiggle to keep the note energized. The question is, where next? For some time now, you've been dreaming of stepping outside of the diatonic box, moving beyond the simple major scale. It requires the right audience, the right musical moment, and the right hand gesture. Then, one day, it happens. Incredibly, this allows you to cadence in a whole new key, to move from G-flat major into its relative minor E-flat minor. This particular audience from San Francisco is on fire tonight, so you take it further, 2 chromatic notes in a row. They even let you go up and down to 2 different chromatic versions of the same note. This is your own version of the audience laughing in surprise at what they themselves have achieved. You've also started to realise that although it's a 3-part choir, it's actually something a bit more complicated than that. The audience is full of men and women who will typically sing an octave apart, and all of them have different vocal ranges in any case. You notice that people shift up or down an octave as they feel comfortable. Sometimes when you go higher, you start to hear lower versions of a note creep in, and you wonder if it might one day be possible to create a human shepherd tone. But here the opposite has happened. The middle of the 3 notes starts firmly in the lower register, but as the volume increases, an impressive soprano line emerges from the female voices. So you take this new soprano section out for a bit of a spin. Here at the top of the soprano range, it reminds you a bit of that choral version of Barber's Adagio. Now you've surprised even yourself at how far you've come. You realise you've actually got a 6-part choir. You try creating a cluster chord by pointing out the notes for the different sections. It works beautifully. There seems to be no end to how far you can push past the boundaries everyone thought existed. You feel very privileged to be blessed with the combination of gifts that make all this possible. The gift of quick-thinking improvisation, the gift of a huge musical curiosity, the gift of physical dexterity, and above all, the gift of the large audiences that make something like this possible. You figure the least you can do is give something back. So you collect recordings of the different choirs from around the world, and you release them with native instruments as a free plugin. It's useful if you need a choir that goes R in your track. Maybe you don't even realise this yourself, but it also gives you a way to practice audience choir without an actual audience. Now all you need is a friend with modest keyboard abilities to play the 3 notes and follow the 3 gestures as if they were the 3 sections of a crowd. It's not only a lot of fun, it's a great test of people's ability to hold harmonies and chords in their head. It's a game that you would probably agree every oral teacher at school should be adding to their lessons. And then you have one final thought. You hear on the grapevine that some classical composer on YouTube has done a nice video explaining everything about your wonderful audience choir idea. And you just hope that some of those nice viewers of the video will help out that poor, undernourished composer by joining his supporters on Patreon. As you've heard them say, even a couple of bucks a month really helps out.
Bruce.